It's not just NPCs and monsters that have morale in Dungeons & Dragons. No, your players have morale too. And if you're not careful, they'll break and run. Hey, Lucart here. I have been a Dungeon Master since high school, and I make weekly videos with information and resources to help other DMs run awesome games. So if you're looking to level up your game, roll a crit on that subscribe button down below and click that bell so you don't miss anything. So about a month ago, my friend Joe, who's been a Dungeon Master for most of his life, told me that he had some ideas for my videos. And, I figure it's his idea and he's got a lot of information sloshing around in his brain, so I should just put him on camera and let him talk about these things. So basically in this video, I'm just going to have a conversation with Joe and he's going to tell us about player morale, what it means, and how understanding it is going to help a Dungeon Master improve his game. And just a quick warning, in case you didn't see the timestamp on this video, we did have a fairly long conversation about this. Now, I could have gone through and edited out a lot of the stuff that didn't directly pertain to player morale, but I think we talked about a lot of really awesome stuff, even if it was kind of a tangent, and so I wanted to keep it all in here because I think a lot of it, maybe all of it, most of it, has a lot of value to it, and I didn't want to, take that away from you. So, let's do this. Alright, man, so the first thing we're going to talk about is player morale.
Yep.
Alright, man, so you wanted to do this thing.
I did.
What do you got? I wanted to do a video, and the way it all started is that you came to me with ideas for a couple videos, right? Yep. And I think we were going to get together and meet, and you were going to kind of give me a bunch of information that I was going to somehow turn into a video.
Right. That's my plan, so I could hide in the other room while you put your face on the internet.
But then it occurred to me that is crazy because we could just videotape the whole thing, and you would just give me the information, we could talk about it, and then we call it a day.
Right.
So, and that makes it easier for me, right? So, anyway, you want to do the player morale. What are we talking about?
So everybody who plays Dungeons & Dragons is very familiar with morale, right?
Yeah. On what level? On a metagame level? You as a player or inside the game?
So inside the game, when the monsters, you've slayed 3 of the 4 goblins, and that 4th goblin looks at you and goes, "I don't really want to die, so I'm going to book it," right? That's he makes some sort of morale check. Dungeon Master just decides it's time for him to give up, basically implying that they have failed their morale.
Yeah.
Now, it occurred to me that the players also have a morale too, and the Dungeon Master needs, we need to watch our players to understand where their morale is at, because it can lead to some extreme problems.
Okay, so when you say player morale, examples or something, what do you mean?
So, I'm not talking about when the players are confronting the dragon, right?
Yeah.
So they know this is going to be a tough fight. They know that it's going to, and it's when they get into the fight, they are things might not go their way in the first 2 rounds of combat.
It's a dragon, right?
Yeah, and they think maybe we should book it, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the actual players themselves.
Right, because at the dragon level, you're really talking about the PCs. The PCs are fighting a dragon, and it's really hard, and so the players are thinking, in-game, my PC wants to run away, or get out of there, or be safe.
Right.
But you're talking about the actual player, Luke or Joe, at a game with Robert, right? And we're losing morale in the sense that we want to, leave his game or something?
Yeah, right. We basically start not trusting our Dungeon Master.
Okay.
To be fair and judicious, we think he's out to get us, he's out to harass us, and actually might even think that he's cruel and mean, and he's just an evil person.
Okay, so those are great, but I want to back up. Trusting your Dungeon Master.
Yeah.
Right. What do you mean by that? And being fair and judicious.
Right. So what's the Dungeon Master's job? And this could probably be a video in itself.
Yeah,
to talk about it in an abstract, but he's basically facilitating the game. But there are several schools of thought on what kind of game he's to run. Is he running a gauntlet for you, the players, to make it through, hopefully successfully?
Yeah.
Or is he setting it up so that you can be like a superhero, right? He's make you feel really good about yourself, maybe have a zany, Easter special kind of, you have to battle bunnies for...
Yeah, like a little bit of a comic book flair or something to it. Yeah.
Right. And there's tons of video cartoons of movies and stuff of comedic fantasy.
Right.
And some people just want to do that. Final Fantasy VII, you walk around with an oversized sword.
It's like twice as big as your body or something.
Yeah.
It's like massive.
Yeah. And so some people want to do that.
Right.
They think that's cool, that's fun. They want to reenact their favorite anime character.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a really good time doing that. And if you're playing that game, I say keep playing that game because you're having fun, but everybody has to be on the same page. If the Dungeon Master decides one day that he's going to create a gauntlet for people, and they're just goofballs, there's discrepancy. So their expectations are suddenly are disjointed and they start falling apart.
I mean, we both know the game that we're thinking about, right? So I wonder to what extent our expectation was. I mean, when our two characters were role playing with each other, your gnome was riding on my shield and stuff, and you were using this persuasion checks against my insight or something to convince me to let you ride on my shield, and I was just going along with it. And objectively, we can say, yeah, that was very goofballish. You know what I mean? But but potentially in that game, the DM was not trying to run that game.
Right.
Right. So there was this misalignment of expectations then.
So just to be really clear, we were playing with a longtime Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master who had run Ravenloft, which is the campaign setting that we were running that time. Mm-hmm. So we're being goofballs in Ravenloft.
Right. Yeah.
So strike one against the players. And he comes from first edition Dungeons and Dragons, where he ran original Ravenloft, and it was a super deadly campaign. So from his expectation of what was to be laid out was a very deadly, very dangerous game.
Right.
And we were kind of going with it in our happy-go-lucky sort of way that we typically address Dungeons and Dragons in a high fantasy world. Where we attempt to frame our characters in a way that we can make some sort of reference to a meme or an anime.
Yeah. I think to some extent though, when I was playing that game, when we were not in combat, I approached it a little bit more loose. You know what I mean? In combat, I was dead serious. I think to some extent was I not?
I don't know.
Okay. But I wasn't taking the combat lightly, you know what I mean? I was doing my best within my character's abilities to win and stuff like that. I wasn't doing stupid stuff, you know what I'm saying? This is what I remember. I think most out of combat. So we had these heavy combats where we're oh man, we almost died.
Right.
I think out of combat then it was our moment to kind of relax a little bit and have fun in a different way, I suppose.
Right.
Because I do enjoy tactical combats and stuff. That's really lots of fun,
And the combats in Ravenloft, if you look at the CR and do all the calculations, they're hard. They're all hard.
Yes. It's funny you mention that because for my Sword Coast card group, once we finish up my homebrew campaign, we're planning on doing Curse of Strahd.
Okay.
That's one of the things that at least a couple of them definitely want to do it. So it might be a year before we finish up my homebrew because I got a lot of stuff going on. But we plan on doing that, and I think what you're saying about expectations. So it'll be a case where before we start, it'll be a player DM meeting where listen guys, this is how this goes, right? This is how I want to run Curse of Strahd, and I haven't decided anything, but I might decide, I want to run this very, very deadly, very, very serious, very grim and stuff like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Do you guys is that cool? You know what I mean? Because there's that kind of agreement almost of what kind of game you want to run.
So be careful. So I've had this thought many, many times while I've run numerous campaigns.
Yeah.
In another instance, I was playing Pathfinder 3.75, right?
Yeah.
Some people call it. And Pathfinder has a Rise of the Runelords module.
I've heard of that.
Everybody loved it. There's a card game based on it. It's an excellent story. But we were trying to learn how to play it by the book. And we were playing Pathfinder through this whole thing. And I sat my players down on the very first day and said, hey, we're going to play Rise of the Rune Lords. We're going to play it by the book. We're going to do the encounters as they're written.
Yeah.
And it's just cut and dry. We can, adjudicate after the fact, but so we ran the first module.
So what you're talking about essentially is like a session 0 is what we would tend to call that. You sit down, you set expectations, and you just talk about the game you're about to run and stuff. Yeah.
So we sat down and we ran the first module, and over the course of the module, about 4 people died. Through the course of that.
Now the module spans like levels what to what?
1 to 16.
Okay, so
each module. So this first module is 1 to 4.
So they split it into several different modules.
Yeah.
But together it comprises Rise of the Rune Lords.
Yeah, Rise of the Rune Lords campaign.
Yeah. Okay.
And people had a really good time.
So only 4 people died over the course of the entire thing.
Yeah, only 4 people died.
But is this permanent die, or die then I raise you and you're back again?
Oh, it is death.
Okay, so in that was the whole thing that you die is permanent death, or what was going on there?
So
we're getting off topic, but this is interesting.
Yeah. So in Pathfinder, you can't raise a person until you're 5th level.
Okay.
Right? And then even still it costs 1,000 gold pieces.
Okay.
And you at low levels do not have that kind of money to bring people back to life.
And if you were running it by the book, I don't know if Pathfinder was like this, but what I've noticed in 5th edition modules, they don't give you much treasure or gold at all in the modules.
Yeah.
Like you're poor.
They do.
So is it similar to that, like in the Rise of the Rune Lords?
They are a little skimpy in the very beginning, but it really starts kicking up later.
Okay.
They have so much treasure by the end that they were using wish spells and stuff against the final boss. But
that's great.
Yeah. Oh, the final fight of that one is totally epic. And I totally recommend it. And a TPK,
is it almost impossible to win then, even with wishes and stuff?
Yeah. So it is not impossible to win, but you have to go into that fight fully souped up with all your magic gear and all your magic potions already equipped, and I have already
cognizant on the bad guy, so you know what you're going into.
Yep. Have some secret weapons to battle against him. Have some dispel magics ready because you know he's a wizard and he's going to be crushing you with time stop and just the 9th level baddies.
Yeah, totally. So.
So anyway, so the point that I was getting to was through the first module we got to the very near the very end, and they got into an encounter where they had to battle 2 Yeath Hounds who were hiding within this cathedral.
Okay.
And they came down, and the Yeath Hound came to them and made a save versus fear attack against the whole party.
Okay.
Half the party ran.
So that means the other half gets cleaned up.
Yeah, and so what they had forgotten is we were playing this by the book.
Right.
They were in their superhero mode again because the last 10 encounters they just crushed the bad guys.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this really bad thing happened, and they had forgotten that they were playing to survive, and they were playing for adventure and superhero levels.
Yeah.
And so they book it, right?
Right.
So half the team books it, the other half of the team stays and fights and tries to win the fight. Now you have 2 Yeath Hounds, which I think are CR2 or CR3, third level characters.
Oh, so this is toward the beginning of the module.
The very end of the first module.
Okay, got you. For some reason I was thinking the end of the whole thing, but okay, got you.
Yeah, so 2 months in, 8 play sessions later, we have this encounter, and it's basically a TPK.
Right.
The 2 people who stayed died.
Yeah. The other ones lived only because they were forced to run.
Right, yeah. And they couldn't come back. They ran away, broke line of sight. They could
save again.
They could calm down and then attempt to strategize about coming back, but they were already too far away and the players had already died. And so everybody got very upset by this particular thing, and they I don't know what they wanted me to do as the Dungeon Master. Was I supposed to redo the scenario?
So why do you think they were upset? Like, what made them upset? Because you had the session 0, you explained I'm running it by the book, and
so don't get attached to your characters. They might die.
The whole conversation.
2 people had died prior to this before reaching the tones, but
it's interesting that they choose that one to get upset about, right?
Yeah, and they felt like I had really done a Dungeon Master screw job.
Yeah, yep. I talk about the Dungeon Master screw a lot.
Yeah.
I hate that stuff.
But it was written right there in the book. Right.
Yep.
And so I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah.
Because we agreed to play it by the book to find out how to play Pathfinder. What did Paizo envision when they came up with the game Pathfinder?
Right, and so that kind of that comes back to our original thing about player morale, right?
Right.
So in that moment, their morale tanked.
Yeah, it absolutely tanked, and they now were afraid that I was a dungeon master that would be totally willing to kill them.
Yeah.
For a bad roll.
Okay.
And
you know that's interesting. I don't want to derail this too much, but it's interesting because like I go on forums and on Reddit and stuff, and I ask people lots of questions and stuff, and it's amazing how many people, and I think they're players, that are adamant the DM never fudge die rolls. They always want the DM to never fudge it. And I don't know if that's because maybe their DMs fudge it against them as opposed to in their benefit, right? But like if you're playing it by the book, like you said, and you're not fudging die rolls, right? Then that's the type of thing that's going to happen, right? Unless behind the screen you're like, you know, holy crap, I don't want to kill them, and then you help them survive or something, right?
So you've played my game. I don't roll behind a screen.
Yeah.
And so yes, I roll dice and don't tell you what I'm rolling for just to make people nervous.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I'm rolling the monsters right out there in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And that was playing by the book, sort of. I know the book recommends you play behind the screen, and it's probably for that reason, so that you could move it back. If you notice that your players are starting to get a little teary-eyed, I don't know.
I'm about ready to go down. It's like, I got 2 hit points left.
But at the same time, it is just a game, you know?
Yeah.
But we forget. I forget that
because you get. I don't know why it is, but you do get so wrapped up in like the emotions of it, and I don't think it's so much that like I get attached to the character itself, because when I'm a player, I love rolling up new characters. I don't care. How many times did I die all the time?
Yeah.
And I was just like,
7.
whatever, I don't care. Rolling up a new character. You know what I mean? But when you feel like you got screwed over, that the DM did something like underhanded some way. You know what I mean? I think that's what happened to us at several points, right? And then our morale, I think in the game we're both kind of talking about, I felt that our morale tanked about 3 times, and the 4th one is when we were like, screw it, we're out of here.
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, so 2 player deaths in a single session.
Yeah.
So you spent most of your time building a character, only to have your character die, to build another character, only to have that character die.
Right. So at the beginning of the game session, we both came in, right, and we went against. We were going against those hags, and there were 3 of like those green hags.
Just for clarity, we got ourselves into that situation because we were being stupid.
Yes.
And we were trying to go find more magic pies for fun.
Because I was addicted to them. I was eating. This is the thing. I ate it. I knew something bad was going to happen, but I thought it would be interesting for the story.
Right.
To eat the pie and have something.
Who does that, right?
Right. Exactly.
But that took us into an encounter where it wasn't just one hag, but it was a whole coven.
There's 3 coven, absolutely.
And
they were like
way overpowered.
They're probably like CR5s individually, and we were like level 3. We never got past level 3 in that game, did we? I think we were 3 the whole.
Maybe 4.
Maybe 4. Okay. But they destroyed us.
Yeah, they absolutely.
Yeah.
But the reason. Okay, so what our dungeon master did was he looked for any reason to just let us in and let us go. But he also looked for any reason to provoke the hags to attack, right?
Yeah.
And so he addressed one of our weaker members of our party and lured them into a fake thing by having the sound of children crying upstairs.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
And so our other party member was going to try to investigate and failed their stealth check.
And that's when they saw the 2 other hags up there, right?
Yeah. And the second they failed that stealth check, the hags started attacking. And now we were in an encounter way over our head. And
we both knew it.
We both knew it. And we tried to book it.
So I think at a metagame level, you and I both knew it was probably a hag of some sort, right?
Right.
But we were thinking one hag, right? And we were also thinking, like,
oh, this is not going to be like fighting and killing. This is just going and bothering some old lady for some sweet pies or something, you know. And then when so then the dungeon master tempted our one party member with something that he knew she would want to go investigate crying children.
Right.
And so then she went up there, right, and then it turned into a big battle, which he knew. He must have objectively knew that was way beyond us.
Right.
So, because this kind of comes back to like the fudging of the dice roll things, because there are so many ways for a dungeon master to back off and save people's bacon if he wants to. Fudging dice rolls is one of them, and it's probably the least like effective way, and it's the most obvious way potentially.
There's certainly you can have story things. You know, the hags could have just laughed and thought of the foolishness of the characters. They could have cursed us. They could have. We wake up in the forest, you know,
naked, hanging from the trees or something,
and we all have tiny heads. Right?
Something, yeah. Or something else is shrunken.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Cut that out of the video.
Go to commercial.
Commercial break!
We actually handled it pretty fine. So our characters tried to run. The hags come down, fire some level 5 magic missiles at us, blow our characters to bits.
Didn't they put us to sleep? Didn't they cast sleep on us or something?
I don't remember. I think my character died of a magic missile.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was dead. The only person to escape, oddly, was the rogue. Right?
Right. The rogue that started it she didn't really start it all. She's the one that fell into the bait.
Yeah, she took the bait and she gets to live. I don't understand. Anyway, we took it with a grain of salt. Our characters are dead. You know, we were playing Ravenloft. We knew we shouldn't be going after meat pies.
And see, here's the thing. I did not feel my morale sink after that battle.
Right.
I didn't care.
Like, stiff upper lip.
I died. It's not a big deal. I knew that I was goofing around and I was going in there. It's like, okay, whatever, we died.
Yep.
And then I rolled up a new character. I think we spent about an hour or something rolling up a new character.
Yep.
While he kept on playing with our rogue, right?
With our rogue, also our weakest player.
Right.
And
then that's when somehow, I wasn't really paying attention, but they ended up getting into that like coffin maker place, right? With the it ended up being vampire spawn, like 5 of them.
Right.
Which I did the math afterwards, and it would be a deadly encounter up until all of us being level 12. At level 13, it turned into a hard encounter.
So we were level 3.
Yeah, we were level 3, exactly.
And so how we ended up, how our other player got lured into this other quest line, I suspect was our dungeon master. So, you know, here we are, tallying up a list of things our dungeon master has done.
Right.
And then we get into that vampire encounter. So we go and we get the materials. We're being really careful to be quiet. And all we have to do is make off with this thing. We think, we'll do it during the day. We'll dive out the window.
Right. Didn't the windows end up having bars over them that the vampire spawn just ripped off and came in or something? Or?
That happened.
Okay.
The bars had windows suddenly. It wasn't in the original. So now I'm doing my player bitching about the dungeon master.
Right, but that's interesting. That has to do with the dungeon master setting the scene properly and explaining the circumstances. Like for instance, if there's a massive pit full of lava in the middle of the room, don't you think you're going to tell the players that, right? And if if your players are in front of you planning and saying, look, we're going to sneak up there. If things go south, we're jumping out the window. Hey guys, I forgot to mention this while you're planning. I forgot to mention this, but there are bars in the windows.
Right.
Oh crap! Okay.
So that plan is a horrible plan.
Yes.
Or requires a crowbar.
Sure.
So we go and get the holy symbol, and suddenly by touching the holy symbol, it triggers the vampire spawn who are sleeping in the room something far away.
That we made sure not to go to, because I think you and I both knew that there's probably something bad in those recording. Stand by. Alright, so that was a good commercial break. So basically, in my Sword Coast Guard group, you were talking about having like nice deadly encounters kind of floating around, right? And so my Sword Coast Guard group, I put like this ancient black dragon in a swamp as like hopefully they're not going to go after it type of thing. Well, they wanted to go after it, right? And so I described, I narratively, we did, in this particular encounter, we did all theater of the mind, but I narratively described this massive black dragon roaring, coming at them, getting larger. There was like a clan of kobolds and stuff, and as this thing was coming at them, I think they were going into the swamp. At that point, they realized, oh crap, This is way more powerful than we can handle. And then one of the guys took a minute to cast teleport to get them out of there. And what I described was the dragon went into the swamp, came up, and as they're going through the teleport, he breathed on them. And they all took like, half of their hit points and damage or something crazy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But that was just like a gift. Yeah, that was a narrative play though to basically they kind of were getting the hint that it was really powerful, but then it reinforced that yes, that would have killed us. You know what I mean? But what you're saying is there's a way to have a deadly thing floating there, but not have it turn into you're all dead.
Yeah. So in last weekend I was playing my own custom campaign, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and I have a bunch of 5th level guys. No. 3rd level guys walking around a cavernous town similar to Underdark, but not exactly. And what I did is place a drider in this cavernous town.
I think a CR7?
CR6. Okay. So a CR5 is a deadly encounter for this group. So it
was
level
3?
Yep, level 3.
Okay.
So a CR6 is even more deadly than deadly, but I thought thematically appropriate. Drider, underground, this is pretty cool. So
it's also like a one monster. So action economy, you might see it going their way. How many players were there?
There were 4.
So it might go their way. It depends on how the battle gets going off. If it goes poorly at the beginning, then they're probably toast.
So what I did is I let them know up front that hey, this is a more than deadly encounter. Metagame level, your characters know that you are not a match for this creature.
Yeah.
If you got into a fight, there's a high probability that one or more of you will die. So
hold on 1 second. I need to get my timer going here so that I don't have my camera shut off again.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Pause, reset. Sorry. There we go. That's good. So how did you let them? How did they know that it was more than they could handle? Because you and I don't typically. You probably didn't just straight up tell them it's too hard for you, right?
So what I did is I described it. I described it as a large spider with a human figure, much like a centaur. So I gave them the typical drider description.
Yeah.
And described that it was a very large creature. It was thrashing, and it looked as if it had a ton of experience. And then I sideboarded it, right? I said, in game mechanics, this is a CR6, beware, right?
So you actually literally told them?
Yeah.
You CR6?
Yeah, I literally told them.
So that's interesting. Why?
So that they knew it was there to be afraid, because the whole point of the monster wasn't to actually use the monster at all.
Okay.
It was my mechanism to get the players to stop taking short rests and long rests after every single encounter.
Oh, they were doing that crap?
Yep. So you just throw in a little mechanism like this. So they're in this village, and it's kind of like an Ewok village. So these stalactites would come up, and there's like little platforms around them.
Okay.
Minzo Baranzan, like.
Yeah.
And the strider was way down in the rocky shards, going down there mindlessly assaulting this and that, looking for whatever it could find.
Okay.
So whenever they produced a light, the drider would attract the drider's attention, and it would start moving towards them, and they could hear this.
Yeah.
The sound of its spider-like legs chitting away. And as they use more lights and stuff like that, it would get closer and closer. And so when they got to an encounter, they realized, oh man, we made so much light.
We're going to draw the attention of that thing.
He's got to be here somewhere.
Which would then cause them not to take a short rest.
Right.
Because they think this guy's coming after us.
Yes, and so they would sneak off to the next location and go into the next encounter.
Yeah.
Right, so as the Dungeon Master was able to...
so you had a deadly encounter just kind of following them, keeping them going.
Right.
Basically.
Right, and so, but you can let them rest. If they really need a rest, they will take that extra step to go off the beaten path, find, or backtrack even, and find a place where they can wall themselves up and do it in a safe way, so that they are not just doing, so if they needed to, they can.
Yeah.
But if they didn't need to, then they have to make a decision about whether to press on.
Yeah, totally. How do you think that ties back in with like player morale and stuff? Because I think we got onto this topic because our dungeon master at the time introduced some really deadly encounters.
Yeah.
And at least a few of them really tanked our morale.
Yeah. So in this particular case, the Drider was fairly stupid. So when the Drider would get close, I would have everybody make a hide check or something, stealth check.
Yeah.
And they would do well. Or if somebody totally botched it, I would say knock it over and it'll get even closer, right?
Yeah.
But I'd always have it get closer, never to them.
Right,
and it would always go half the distance, like, that Achilles, the race of Achilles or whatever.
Yeah.
The,
Were you handling all this narratively, just like theater of the mind type of thing?
Yeah.
Describing it getting closer. It wasn't actually on the board in the minis
Yeah.
type of thing. Because I know you and I both do like miniature. Was this a miniature game?
So this was a miniatures
Okay.
game, but the Drider was not present on the map, so I could keep it
Yeah.
some distance apart.
Yep.
I use the miniatures just for doing the strategic battles
Yeah.
in this particular setting.
It's interesting. I found that this is a tangent, but unless your entire game is miniature and map, and they're moving and navigating the whole time, if you're doing everything kind of narratively theater of the mind, and then in a particular moment you decide to put a map out, I think your player's mentality shifts to, oh, this is combat time. You know what I mean? And they immediately start thinking, oh, we're going to fight something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had that Drider coming along, right, and then you decided I'm going to actually put it on the map, that probably, at that point, I wonder if the player's thinking would switch from get away to, oh crap, Joe put the Drider on the map, it's time to fight,
So of course I had a Drider miniature,
Yeah.
and I had him sitting on my box.
So they could see it.
So they could see it, right?
Right there.
And also, when I have encounters, sometimes they're just wandering along and all of a sudden, bugbears leap out from whatever. And then I will draw the map and I ask them, please place your miniatures on the map. Then I place the bugbears on the map and start the combat right there. So they know that if the Drider does get too close, if they try to test me on this one,
You'll just tell them, let's go.
all right,
Yeah.
Drider.
Yeah.
And if they defeat the Drider, heck, maybe the Drider had a +1 sword or +2 sword or something cool.
Sure.
To make it worthwhile, because they need something now because 2 of their party members are dead.
That's awesome. And so doing that allows the dungeon master to use those deadly encounters, but not in such a way that destroys and kills a couple players, and then possibly causes the group morale to tank and stuff.
So they probably saw that as I was very I had the hammer to smish them with.
Yeah.
But they said that they probably thought, oh, they gave us all the chances in the world to get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's how they viewed it. Whereas in our particular situation, we had all those vampires surround us immediately, and we were just like, we're dead.
There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, we're dead. We're totally dead.
Yeah.
And so.
And it wasn't. Yeah, it was just kind of like one little wrong decision and boom, it's over.
And
we felt baited into it, right?
So the other player, of course it wasn't me and it wasn't you who went out and bought the Ravenloft book after the fact and read the scene and what.
I do not have access to PDFs at all.
That's that would just be cheating. The other player, but seriously, the other player did go and read that after the fact, and because they were really mad about the death scene, and they said the vampires don't attack. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, you actually dig into their box, do they attack?
It literally says in the module that as long as the vampires only come out of their coffins if you go into the room or you disturb their boxes, the coffins. Yeah. But if you don't go there, if you just simply go up and get the medallion or whatever it was, a holy symbol or something, they don't come out. Yeah. It explicitly says it in the module. So here's the question that I've always wondered. So I got the sense that our DM probably didn't prepare this stuff super, super well, which is, to his credit, it's hard to do because it's a sandbox, and he doesn't, to a large extent, Ravenloft, I believe, is designed as a sandbox. Any module kind of is in the sense that you can decide to go different places, right? So I mean, but of course he's putting the hooks there that would lead us to that place. So let's just say that we ended up going somewhere that he didn't anticipate, right? And so he's on the fly trying to run it. He could have made a mistake, right? But it's also possible that he knew exactly what it actually said and was like, screw it, I'm teaching him a lesson.
Yep.
For whatever reason.
Yeah, because of the pie episode. He was still on us over goofing around in his Ravenloft world. That's okay. So that is my perception. That is not necessarily what he was doing. You know, he could have.
Sure.
Any number of things could have happened, but
Yeah.
that was my perception. And what I'm saying about player morale is, I was totally freaked out that my dungeon master was trying to just irk me, like to give me wedgies and to pull them up over my head. I mean, he really had it out for me.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I don't want to play this game. Even though I really did. I really wanted to play a hard game. I really wanted to play a grueling Ravenloft thing. And this person I've been friends with for a very long time. And I respected them, and we had a lot of fun together.
Yeah. I loved the tactical combats that we had.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, those were amazing. Like, I mean, I'll do whatever trash talk I want to about that guy, but like, he ran some really awesome battles. You know what I mean? Those were lots of fun.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So, so our morale totally tanked at that point.
Yeah,
you know?
and it took me a long time thinking about this after the fact that it basically came down to the fact that I got psyched out. Now,
Psyched out? What do you mean psyched out?
like,
You were expecting one thing, but it turned into another?
no,
Or?
that I had a genuine sense of fear. Now,
Okay.
let's pretend. Our
Like, as a
dungeon-
player, you were afraid of...
Yeah, I was afraid of I was actually afraid of my friend
Okay.
because I thought he was being abusive.
Okay.
But let's pretend that he wasn't being abusive. Let's pretend he was just creating a hard world, creating a hard game, and and sometimes that really pays off because the game really comes out and becomes very fun when the threat of death is very real for your characters.
Yes.
So when
It increases the tension, the drama, the stakes. Yeah. And then when you win, it feels that much better.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I had one instance with this guy where I was the last person alive. My illusionist was the last person.
Was I in that game, or was that something else?
Maybe. No, it was. That was before, but.
Okay.
I had my illusionist alive, and there was 2 bad guys left, and I had one spell, one first level spell, color spray.
Yeah.
I think we were running Pathfinder at this point.
Okay.
And so I used color spray, and the guys' hit dies were within line, and they all became stunned.
Yeah.
Which meant I could or not stunned. They became unconscious.
Okay. So you can.
So I could
coup de grace
them. But it all came down to literally one desperate play to get the 2 guys within a 15-foot cone.
You're like kiting them around until they got into that perfect cone.
Right. And they came in the perfect cone, and they both had to fail their saving throws.
Right. Because the one spell you have.
Against
It's
the
like you
one
have
spell.
one bullet and you gotta line their heads up and
Right.
and then it happens to not ricochet off, you know. Yeah.
Exactly. And they were both unconscious.
And you got away.
No, I killed them.
Oh, you killed him. Yeah.
Yeah, I had he was a gnome, of course. So love gnomes. Had a sickle, the hook hammer, the gnomish hook hammer, which had a sickle ×4 weapon, so ×4 crit.
Oh, jeez.
So it was an excellent.
The auto crit, is that how it works?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was an auto slay.
Yeah.
Just about anybody who I would manage to knock unconscious.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was like the coolest thing. Everybody was cheering. I mean, everybody was like, "Oh my God, we're all gonna die. This is gonna be a TPK." We're all just sitting around watching the dice, and boom, great moment in Dungeons and Dragons. And that was, but that was directly from the guy who would kick it up a notch. You would always make the fight super hard.
Yeah.
He'd have the dungeon crash down on top of us.
Yeah.
You know, double up the encounters. So, so he can run a good game. He absolutely can, and I don't know what it was up with that day.
Yeah.
But it totally freaked me out, and I stopped playing, and I've stopped playing with him for like 6 months.
Yeah.
we're getting back together to play Hackmaster, but
because our game crash landed like it was like a year ago though, wasn't it? Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really bad with time. I like to say that I'm a timeless individual.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think over the course of that game, though, like there were, I think that was either the third or fourth time. I mean, there were at least a couple other incidents where like we were generally like you and I were both like upset about things that were happening. They felt like damn screw jobs.
Yes.
Like remember the mountain that he described us going up?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, make dexterity saves or whatever it was, and like. We legitimately almost died to flowers blowing up in our faces.
Right.
You know.
First we're going up this mountain, and we have to make a dexterity save. Then we fall, and all of a sudden, this mountain is covered in berry bushes.
Yeah, which that wasn't described, was it? Was that described?
No, after the fact, it was described.
Yeah.
And that these berry bushes had explosive berries on them.
Yeah.
Like. I'm just like stunned. Like. Oh my god. Like, I almost got killed by
But even after we almost died, weren't we still screwing around trying to harvest them or something?
Yeah, of course. and so the expectations definitely didn't match.
Yeah. And then the other time, I remember we were doing Death House, and we were doing the 10-foot pole thing every square, because we got screwed by a trap at one point. And so now, our entire game is slowing down to a crawl, because we're doing the 10-foot on each square, the tappy thing.
Right.
And then, remember what happened, like, there's that room, the other player went in, and she was the tapper, she tapped everything, including a segment of wall.
Right.
And then, she or somebody opened up the chest, and then 2 ghouls or ghasts broke through the thin plaster of the wall.
Right, that we had been tapping on just like seconds ago.
Exactly, and our question was, if this plaster is so thin that they just break through, and it didn't even take one action or anything. They got a surprise round on it, so it was so thin they just moved right through it.
Yep.
If it's that thin, then shouldn't our tapping have done something? And it was like, no, they get an attack of opportunity, a surprise round on you guys.
Yep.
And like I think that was another instance where we were pretty upset about that. I think.
Yeah, we thought that was. So I came to the determination that this dungeon master is kind of engaging in hostile negotiations with us.
Yeah.
He wants us to play a real detailed game. He always wants to have his monsters jump out. Well, the way to counter that is to be methodical, and the person who has the most patience will win that every time. And so I just basically sat back and was like, okay, describe the door to me. Describe the doorknob. How about the hinges? What do the hinges look like? You got everything. Yeah. What is the wood? Is there dust? Is there spider webs? Is there oiled? Is it rusty? And just go down the list of all these different things.
And the main problem I see with that approach is that it slows the game down to a crawl, and in my opinion, makes it uninteresting. And you're almost forced to do that, because if you don't, the one thing that you didn't inspect on that door is the thing that turns into something that kills you.
Yeah. But I would like to remind everybody that the game is Dungeons and Dragons, not Dungeons and Door.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about the door. Come on,
there's more interesting stuff to be done here than to fret over the 10-foot pole tapping every square.
If you're a dungeon master and you want to lay out clever traps or do clever things with your players, remember have it be action, right? So you have a clever trap, rolling boulder that comes around that is part of the encounter, and that you have to be wary of where you stand, because you could end up in front of this rolling boulder.
Yeah, I remember one encounter you did for us that was amazing. Is you had us in a room with something that was rolling around, and it was reflecting off from stuff, and we had to like not get in its path, and I forget all the details, but it was awesome. Yep. You know what I mean? So, and there wasn't a bomb that was.
It was a giant rolling bomb.
And it was like the fuse was ticking down or something. Yeah.
And you needed to like either break it or get it to stop or something, so you could get the fuse out.
I don't remember how we solved that. I think we didn't die, did we?
No, I think you.
Did we get away and then it blew up or something?
I did believe it blew up.
Yeah.
So you had to get out and it blew up.
Yeah.
On the bad guy. All the while there was a bad guy there shooting at you with his. Whatever his bomb gun.
I have such horrible memory, but
it was super fun. But that was just kind of a shoots and ladders sort of map. You draw little arrows going all over the place, and so when the bomb moves, it moves a random amount of feet, but it just follows the arrows around, and the players can kind of see the groove marks or whatever, and
so they know where it's going to be going, they just don't know how far.
Right.
And it was kind of was it a smallish type room, so we didn't really have tons of space to move around.
Right. So it was kind of like a flower. So it had these petals going out on the side, so when the bomb rolled into it, it could deflect in different directions, and then it would kind of crisscross all over the place in the room. It wasn't a huge room.
Yeah.
It was maybe, I don't know, 60 feet, so 12 squares.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was super fun.
Did you have a diagram for this that there was like, where's that with the other video? This one right here, versus expectations or something. Was that part of the morale, or was that part of the generational differences?
So that was part of this.
The morale, okay.
So, basically what we're talking about is player expectations versus what your expectations are.
As a DM.
But it gets very confusing sometimes, because you would think that if you were to graph the difficulty of the game and the experience of the player, you would have a linear climb. You would have players enjoy a more difficult game.
So the more experience the player gets,
Yep.
the more difficult game he enjoys.
Yeah. So, if you've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 36 years or however long, you're very experienced, and what you are looking for is a very difficult game to put your experience against.
Right. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
But the reality is very experienced players sometimes expect a very easy game because they are so talented. Mm-hmm. So, instead of this game, they're expecting this game, and it's diving straight down.
Right, just because they figure that with their years of experience, all that they've done, their knowledge, and look at this character, this frickin' like 2 warlock, 8 paladin, 3 sork, crazy combo build that I have should just steamroll stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, and then if it doesn't turn out that way, their expectations are misaligned.
Right, and so what happens is they shrink the Dungeon Master's play area. They're thinking, I am so experienced at this game that obviously the Dungeon Master is doing something wrong because my character is dying. Not that I should have adjusted my expectations.
Yeah.
So, if you have players that have been with you for 10, 20 years, you can have very hard encounters, but you have to let them know that their expectations, you have to keep their expectations in mind. One of the important things that I learned is reminding the players. You can sit them down in the beginning and tell them, I want to run a horror survival game.
Right.
I want to run a Ravenloft adventure that's going to murder you over and over again.
But they'll forget.
Yeah. And you'll have to remind them, and you might have to remind them every single session.
Right.
Especially if you have a monthly game. On a weekly game, it might be a little easier, but still, my weekly game, they forgot. They forgot they were playing by the book. They were playing first the monsters in the book, and they died.
So it's just like the very beginning of the game session. All right, remember guys, here's a Strahd. All right, this is gonna be really hard. So get your big boy pants on.
And get your grim faces. Psych up your players. One of the things about player morale too that I did and that our friend did was psych our players out. So they would say, all right, you guys ready to die? Just good old Dungeon Master, I'm going to destroy you.
Yeah.
The t-shirt, Dungeon Masters don't kill people. Oh wait, yeah, I do. If your players start believing that, you have a problem.
Right, if they actually believe it.
Yeah.
And they don't think you're joking anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's real life. Don't say things you don't mean.
Yeah.
Because people will lose track of what you mean.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So
yeah, you remind them.
Yeah. You have to remind them. You can get into that good kind of camaraderie where you are the dungeon master who is going to try to kill his players, and sometimes you do actually kill the players, but
players.
That's
So
never
this
happened.
sounds like a problem. All
right, cut this out. We don't want this going on.
All right, retake. All right, so as
Player characters.
Yeah, player characters. All right.
So yeah,
That's why we have basements. That's why all good DMs have basements and root cellars and garages.
This is going into dark places. But of course, this is Dungeons and Dragons, right?
I got you off your train of thought. So
Yeah.
reminding players and stuff of like what the expectations are each time, like each game and stuff.
Yeah, which will actually prevent them from having a different set of expectations from you.
Yeah.
That might work. However, there are players that are just goofballs, and you can't take the goofball out of them. Maybe you need to get that player into a different table.
Yeah.
Play a different game with that person. Stop playing Ravenloft. Play.
Yeah.
The Storm Giant one or whatever.
Sure. It's interesting you talk about the different styles of games because like the types of the games I run like on the weekends, like the Saturdays and Sunday games that I run are much more serious games, you know what I mean? Like we still laugh and have fun and stuff, but like compare it to like the game you're in with me during like, lunches on Thursdays, that's a much more slapstick, goofy, loose game. I mean, they were killing people by farting on their faces at one point, right? So, I mean, there's definitely different, types of games you can run and different like expectations and different things, Like for the Thursday one, I'm just like, whatever guys, we're just here to unwind and have some fun and it's D&D, but like, yeah, you can fart on his face and you make a performance check and he makes something else and
Constitution saving throw.
Exactly, but I wouldn't do that sort of thing on my weekend games because the tone is totally different. You know what I mean? So I think that's what you're kind of getting at, right?
Right. But even with your long running games, your more serious games, you can still run into this problem.
Yeah.
If they forget that, hey, we're playing this game.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge gambit or a huge swath of different styles of games. At the highest end, you have the superheroes game, and then down at the bottom, you have like the Walking Dead Dungeons and Dragons role playing game where
Right.
Main characters get killed off as just part of the show.
Yeah.
Though you can play those things very successfully, but everybody has to agree on that game, or people with differing expectations will start starting to they will start resenting you. They'll start having friction. They will go home and not have fun.
Right. Yeah.
It's just.
So it's interesting because like I loved the tactical combats in that game, but like there were things about it I didn't like, right? And so one of the reasons I didn't probably quit earlier than I did, you know what I mean, was that like there were certain things that were happening that made me feel a certain way as a player, and like bad ways, right? And I was taking note of that because I was intentionally staying in what I considered to be a bad game. There were good parts, there were lots of bad parts.
Yep.
I was intentionally staying in a bad game so that I would observe the things that the DM was doing that were making me feel a certain negative way so that I could then internalize that and think that over and be like, okay, Luke, don't do this in your games because it makes your players feel this way, which is bad, you know what I mean? Like the feeling of like unfairness, you know what I mean? But that wasn't fair, right? Like he screwed me over, you know what I mean? There's nothing I do about it because he's the DM. The only thing I really can do, so I can present a logical argument, right, that makes sense, you know what I mean? But like if he's just gonna, there's a point where the DM is just going to say, no, it's going to be this way, and you respect that. As long as it seems like as long as he listens to you, right, and seems to be respecting your viewpoint, and then explains to you maybe why he's doing it, then it's a little softer, right? But when things feel unfair, you know what I mean, then it's just kind of like you just feel like you're getting screwed.
The real thing is you gotta talk to your players, or your players gotta talk to your dungeon master, because if you don't have that channel of communication, your expectations will deviate, and you'll start your the things that tie you together will start falling. Your game will fall apart.
Right.
I just, in that particular game, I should have talked with him more often. I went out to lunch with him.
Yeah.
Oops, I said his name. Ha! We did the whole thing without saying his name.
All right, so try to cut that part out where he said the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we did that whole thing. Oh shit! I lost my spot again.
Yeah, so you should have talked with him more frequently during the course of the game, right?
Mm-hmm. And so that we could have judged expectations. What was his? I still don't know what his expectations were.
Right.
At some point, I think he was trying to show off for me. Show me that he can be an awesome dungeon master.
Right.
And make it really challenging because he knows that I've been playing this game for forever. So he really wanted to make it a good game, and he knows where it gets good is when it starts getting deadly.
When it gets deadly and like most of the time you still win because there's that feeling of like success, like it was a hard one fought. Occasionally if you lose, it's acceptable, you know what I mean? But when it's always lose, always dying, that's when it just starts to feel like this kind of sucks a little bit. You know what I mean? We just keep dying,
If there were reasons why you were dying, if it was explainable, and if we had this communication path, if he could explain to us why we keep dying, because he wants us to rise to the level. So one of my players, in my Pathfinder game, one of my players, so I had one player who was completely afraid of me. And I had another player who was saying that he was going to drop out because he isn't having any fun.
So hold on a second. One player was afraid of you.
Yes.
Do you know why he was? Like, what was in what way?
Because he thought I would just kill him for unmercilessly.
Okay.
There was nothing that he could do to prevent it.
Okay. It was like hopelessness almost too.
The odd thing is his character never died.
Yeah.
It was other people's characters who had died. So it was a little incongruent.
You figured his time was coming.
Yeah, his time was coming. And he was going to be toast just because I felt like it's time.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was scared of me. But it started infecting my other player. My other player wanted to actually leave. So I sat down with him and explained exactly.
So when he said he wanted to leave, did he give you like a reason? Like what was his official reason?
Something about life issues or whatever.
But it wasn't actually that. It was like something else.
It was really the game. It was really stuff in the game. So I pulled him aside and I started talking to him. I asked him, what are you seeing that is turning you off from the game?
Yeah. Now was this a friend that you knew? It wasn't just like a random person you played with for a while. It was actually someone you knew as a friend.
So it's a person I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons with. We've had a solid game for 10 years.
Okay.
12, 13 years now. Which is no mean feat. I mean.
Oh, that's crazy. Absolutely.
And so this person was actually ready to step out, and I was like, oh my.
What's going on? Yeah, totally.
So I explained it. It was like, he's like, I feel that, you're not on our side. And I was like, well, I'm the dungeon master. Of course I'm not on your side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against you, though. And he goes, well, it feels like you're against me. And
Okay.
I'm like, that's a valid complaint. How do you see that? And he explained that whenever you make a ruling, you always rule against us.
Right.
And I was like, that may be the case.
Yeah.
How about next time when I make a ruling and the rules are unclear, we just roll 20s, and whoever gets the higher, that's the way the rule falls until we can figure it out after the fact.
Sure. Yeah.
Does that work? And he was like, yeah, that works really well. And and then I also explained what kind of game I was running. I told him, remember when we first started this?
Yeah.
I said, we're going to run this by the book to find out what Paizo had imagined when they created their game.
Right.
Because this is their baby. This is their how they imagine the game is played, with the difficulty level and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're in the process of learning this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid that I'm going to lose you as a player because we're testing stuff out.
Yeah.
And we're not playing for keeps. We're not playing for real. We're just testing some stuff out.
Right.
So I kind of want you to bear with me.
Yeah. Because normally, it sounds like normally you would take a module and you would customize a little bit in some way or another. You wouldn't play it straight by the book. That seems to be what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, you were just doing it straight by the book.
I was using the encounter straight out of the book. As you know, like most modules don't really have a lot of detail. They say there's a monster and here's the room, right?
You got to figure out what that means.
Yeah. And so you got to be like, well, what do you think Paizo guys meant when there's this room with all these alcoves for hiding and put a stealth creature in there?
Ambush.
Well,
yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you think, could be an ambush. So I'm going to run it as an ambush.
It's interesting that they don't give those details, because that seems like such a basic thing that you would give just a few bullet points about these are suggestions for running this encounter.
Right.
That takes a minimal amount of effort, especially as a game designer. Like I publish some of my own little modules and stuff on DirectRPG, and one of the things when I'm designing the game, and all of these games they're all things that I had run for my own groups, and when I was making it myself, I was thinking, okay, alcoves, bugbears. I had this one where there were like pools of water, and bugbears were hiding under them with like little drinking straws or something to breathe through. And they came into this room, and there were gargoyles in the room, up on the statues, and they're all investigating these gargoyles because they look like gargoyles.
Sure. Yeah.
And then what happens? Well, the bugbears all spring out of the water and attack them. You know what I mean? And I think those actually were gargoyles too, so they had gargoyles and bugbears, you know what I mean? But it doesn't, so I designed it that way, I was thinking that way. How much effort does it take me to put a few bullet points in that little section of the thing that I'm writing that says, this is how I would suggest running it, freak the players out about the gargoyles. When they're investigating them and distracted, the bugbears who are hiding under the water spring out and attack them and most likely gain a surprise round. That's very, very simple to write that, and that helps inform the dungeon master on how to run that, you know what I mean? But anyway, we're going way off topic. But
we're way off.
This is like one big rambling thing, right? That's all over the place.
Good thing you can edit and chop it apart and put it back
I
together.
can, but you know what? There's this. Although it's kind of coming off topic and stuff. I mean, we're talking about a lot of really good stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm probably just going to present most of this as is.
Okay.
So anyway, you got other stuff on there?
I think we're pretty much done with my notes on player morale.
On the player morale stuff?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So I think to kind of wrap it up then, I think what are the parting... So obviously the whole channel that I do is basically, the whole idea is to help other DMs run awesome games and stuff. So with the whole topic of player morale and so the idea is that the DM would keep an eye on his players and try to see and gauge somehow when their morale is dipping. So I want to cover two things. What are things that might be signs that your player's morale is dipping? And if you see their morale is dipping, what should you do as a DM at that point?
So, if I had to go back to the Ethone encounter, back to it's really comes down to the simplest thing. Talk to your players. Talk to the individual. Bring them aside. Take them out, even in the middle of the game. Being like, hey, I know this is a bad moment and things like that, but I kind of want to explain to you what's going on here. So the behind the scenes things, and you're on board with what is going on.
Yeah.
If you have that door open to you, if you no longer can communicate with your player, you have to let them go.
Now, how would you? So backing off from that, how would you recognize that there's a problem? I wonder too. How would you, what do you think? I mean, before the player actually says, "Dude, I'm out." You know what I mean? So the game is just kind of going along. What are things you could look for to recognize that there might be a mismatch of expectations or something?
Throwing up the dice, saying things like I swing my sword, acting all bored. Disinterest. If they see if their mind is wandering, they're having sidebar conversations that aren't relevant to the game.
Yeah.
I encourage people to have players that are plotting, because that can be fun as well. But
but if they're talking about Pokemon Go or something stupid crap,
I
probably just offended some people who play that game.
Yep.
It's I have 2 viewers who are like, Pokemon Go, he doesn't like that.
Gone. No, actually, at my table, I have a no electronics rule.
I know you do.
And you can do anything else. You can put together a puzzle for all I care. But I just say no electronics because
it can be a problem. I don't have that rule, but I actually 2 game sessions ago, one of my groups, I noticed like a lot of them had electronics out for significant parts of the game, and like I was like, what's going on here? And so at that very last game session that I had with them, just like a week ago or 2 weeks ago almost, I had it in my notes, my pregame notes, like, to talk to them about it. I was like, hey guys, at the last game session, I noticed I saw lots of electronic devices out for lots of time. You know what I mean? Like, if you're actually legitimately looking up stuff in the game, like I know I use a spellbook app on here that's crazy useful and stuff. That's totally cool. I just want you guys to try to minimize the amount that you're doing non-D&D stuff. You know what I mean? If you could do that, that would be awesome. And that game session, nobody's looking at anything except for one guy who uses like a little mini iPad because that's where he has his character handbook. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I going back to what you said, talking to your players, and all it took, so I could have either not said anything and just kept observing this, and as a dungeon master getting upset about it, and then either coming down with a no electronics rule or taking it out on them or something, or making the assumption that my players must not like my game, I'm just going to stop DMing. I could have done a lot of different things, but what you said is talk to them. Yep. All I did was talk to them, and that game session was fine, and everybody was like, cool with it. It's not a big deal. I don't mind if people check their phones every so often, but when you're sitting there and the battle's going on and you're like, you know what I mean, that's different.
Going high score on Candy Crush or whatever.
And it's probably going to be, you might have to remind them of things, but talking is where it all starts. Like,
I like it when the players are leaning over the table, looking at the individual things. So large tables, horrible, are absolutely horrible. You want your players close by so they can see the action playing out.
Yeah.
So that everybody can stay in there. Theater of the mind has a nice aspect where the table is actually in your head.
Yes.
And it forces you to engage, because if you're not, because if you step out of that, you can't, you don't know what's going on at all.
It's interesting. So 3 of my games are all mini and grids. One of them is pure theater of the mind. The one I run with you, theater of the mind.
Yeah.
And so what I found myself doing is the 3 grid and mini ones during combat and stuff, I'm much less likely to describe things narratively quite as much.
Yes.
Theater of the mind, I mean, you saw me the other day.
Yeah.
Every little thing, I'm describing it, I'm painting the picture, you know what I mean? And you're constantly reinforcing that.
Yeah.
And theater of the mind lends itself super well to heavy narrative, description, and all this stuff. But it goes back to what you were saying, keeping that in your head, keeping that game in your head, right? Because you can't reference a grid or a mini and stuff. And so as a DM, I think it's cool, but I feel like I gotta describe this stuff. You know what I mean? Because if I'm not reinforcing to the rogue, the big fat dude is taking up the whole tunnel and she can't shoot past him.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I kept reminding her of that. It's like, oh yeah, that sucks. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's interesting how I've never run Theater of the Mind until really with you guys in the Thursday group, and like I like it. There are lots. I love grid and minis too. I'm never going to give that up. But there are lots of advantages for sure.
Yeah.
That's Theater of the Mind.
So I run Shadowrun exclusively in Theater of the Mind.
Right.
And the attention to Shadowrun is a very complex game as far as the rule set goes. But at the same time, it also has an attention to detail that's above and beyond anything that Dungeons and Dragons can deliver.
Yeah.
And every little nuanced thing makes a difference. So. We have a scene where they're in the IHOP, or whatever they call it now.
Yeah.
And one person is standing on the other side of the chairs and the divider for where people sit, and he's standing over there with his gun shooting over the thing. Well, it mattered the fact that he was standing as opposed to crouching down or in a booth or next to the window or where was he doing with the grid? You can't put the miniature in the booth. Mm-hmm. You can't put them under the table. You can't put them any of those places. And there were so many places in the IHOP to be sitting.
So in the Theater of the Mind game, you maybe asked him, or he told you, like, where are you and what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm behind the little wall, with my gun kind of poised over it. And that immediately told you his position, location, everything. Yeah. Whereas with the grid, he could be like, well, my mini's here. And then that's all you have a physical location in that grid, but maybe not much else.
Yeah. And so when the grenade went off and blew all the pancakes in his face, I mean,
That's awesome.
it was just great. It just, It just works really well because you knew exactly where he was standing. He was over, he was over the wall. He had his gun ready, and when the grenade lobbed into his area, he knew he needed to move. Instead, he hunkered down, and it blew up the tables with the pancakes.
And he was behind like a little wall or something.
Yeah, and he just he just got slimed with a whole bunch of syrup. And whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So I mean, basically, so if you see your players' morale tanking, then it's talk to the players, right? Have a conversation with them.
Yeah. There's also, you can also play a little judiciously. So as the dungeon master, never fudge the dice, right? But of course, you have your dungeon master screen, and you're rolling behind there. And if you see your players feeling like they can't accomplish anything, that their choices don't matter, you can definitely institute choices matter to them, give them the opportunities to make choices that matter, and really encourage them. And one of the styles I've been recently adopting is the always say yes mentality. If you can, sometimes you can't.
I want to jump to the moon.
Right. You roll a d20, try their DC's 400, try harder. Maybe you need a rocket tied to your foot.
Yeah.
So
always say yes. Yeah.
Yeah, just always try to say yes to them, because it will help them feel like their choices matter.
Right. The thing, so there are only a couple of things that I regret as a dungeon master, right? Like where I think about it, I'm like, damn it, why didn't you? You know what I mean? And it's always revolved around my saying no to something, and then later I'm like, I should have said yes. I should have said yes. This one time, one of my players there was this door, and he's like, I want to wedge the door somehow, and I was like, there's no way you can wedge the door. And that was it. That was the end of it. And we moved on. And later I'm like, that was dumb. There could have been a way. And then another time was the player wanted to use his reaction. Like his buddy was getting pulled out of his space into danger. Can I use my reaction to try to grapple my buddy and grab a hold of him? You can use reaction to attack somebody. Why shouldn't you be able to use your reaction to grapple someone? Sure. It's not in the rules, but I was like, no, it's not in the rules, so you can't do it. You know what I mean? And in those two cases, I always think of them, I'm like, those were mistakes. And I think, so the answer, I think, I like the whole yes. One of the things I like to do too is if a player tells me something that I don't think is possible, instead of saying no, it's not possible, I'll turn it back on them and say, explain to me how you would do that. So for instance, I want to wedge the door. I think it's impossible. How would you do that? Well, I take my dagger and I put it here, and you know what I mean? So you know what I mean? So just ask them, because sometimes asking them, well, how would you do that? It does two things. One, they might actually have a reason that's plausible, and you're like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Or they'll be like, I have no idea. Okay, never mind, I don't do that. Right. And then you don't have to say no. Right. Because they basically considered, yeah, I don't think that's possible at all. And then they talk themselves out of it in a way. And then it kind of helps you avoid having to say no, and it makes them more try to have to justify or explain at least, or come up with a creative idea to do that thing that they want to do. You know what I mean? So, but I definitely agree with you. It's the yes but or the yes and. I definitely like that. There are definitely times I think where it's like, no, it's not going to happen. But for the most part, like trying to roll with it
I have played games in which my players have taken me so far off into the weeds that I didn't even realize I was telling a completely different story as the dungeon master than what I had intended, but the story that I was telling was so much better. Yeah. Because the way they worked. Most recently, I had a Shadowrun adventure where they had to go steal diamonds from a bank. So, what happened? It turned into they decided to go steal the bank, the safety deposit box keys from the people who had them instead.
Their homes.
Yeah, and then they would go in and just open a safety deposit box with the keys. I'm just like, exactly. And then next thing you know, I'm running an adventure in their home, and there's a dinner party, and the whole thing just kind of flew out. Yeah. as this great thing, and the political intrigue. It was just great.
So we had a game session for our game where you guys remember the giant, and you did the illusion of the giantess and all that. Didn't plan for that at all. That was totally 100% improv, right? I think I did a video on that, right? Mm-hmm. But like that was one of those situations where, like you said, your players take you off into the weeds. You didn't plan for it, but that story was amazing. That was awesome. Like it's crazy sweet,
And so so you have some players who are familiar with the giant, right? And knowing that he got stood up by the illusionary giantess when she disappeared, that could have some consequences later on.
Right.
And now you have an NPC that is a reoccurring villain.
Right.
That you totally didn't have before.
Exactly. And there's a story behind it.
Yeah.
There's a good story behind it. And the day that you guys run into a giant and some of his snow leopard pets again, you're all going to remember what it was, and you're all going to be like, we brought this on ourselves, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it will be a lot of fun and a lot of laughs. And, maybe another dupe, clever players can dupe him again, and then he continues being a reoccurring villain.
Exactly.
That he's getting wise to your small time tricks, so you're going to have to keep outdoing yourself.
And it almost becomes that's the game, right? The players, when they run into that giant, they don't want to kill him. They want to keep tricking him so that he'll go away and then come back, and you kind of still have this little ongoing thing coming on. I think what we were talking about is like if you see your players' morale tanking, like one of the things to try to remedy that is to like say yes more, because it feels like less that you're like opposing them or something, or you're more on their side. Is that kind of what we were saying?
So that relieves a lot of the tension. So the underlying reason why he's feeling like you're screwing him over is because he doesn't have any control over his character's fate.
Okay.
Underlying it. So give him some control over his fate.
And when you say no, it reinforces he has no control.
Right.
When you say yes, it makes him feel like he has control.
Right. And so that relieves some of the tension, and if he can get true benefit from saying yes, he will feel like he's capable and is capable of acting.
Yeah.
This actually relates to another subject that I had discovered. We were playing high-level Pathfinder, and at high-level Pathfinder, the game kind of slows down. But we have a 3-hour session once a week, and in a 3-hour session, we were able to get through one combat.
It slows down because the combats are so challenging and tough.
Yeah.
They just take longer. There are more rounds, stuff's going on.
Sometimes it would take 2 nights. 2 nights.
For one combat.
For one combat, yeah. And so if you were in a combat, so let's say you are the mage, and you're battling the anti-magic Bandersnatch from Pathfinder, you can't do anything. And you can't do anything for one night. And if the combat goes to the next, you can't do anything for 2 nights.
That's because that creature is like immune to magic or something?
Immune to magic, right.
Okay.
So everything that you could possibly do,
Yeah.
So it had like a 60-foot radius sphere of anti-magic, so all of your spells...
Similar to a beholder, basically.
Yeah. And so there wasn't anything you could do except run back quite a distance and...
Throw darts or something, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and a 17th level wizard throwing darts at a...
Pathetic.
Yeah, it's really... So what I had discovered is we needed to speed up our combats and things like that.
Yeah.
Because we needed to get through 2 encounters a night no matter what. Because players were feeling like they were not...
Making progress?
Not making... They weren't contributing.
Okay.
And if you don't contribute the entire game session,
Yeah.
wow, that's a hard thing to go to sleep on.
Right.
If you're not contributing for 2 sessions in a row...
Why am I playing anymore?
Yeah, why am I playing?
Yeah.
And so I always made sure that you did 2 combats and that those 2 combats didn't have the same weakness,
Right. Yep.
So I didn't throw the beholder after the Bandersnatch.
Yeah.
No 2 anti-magic effects at the same time. I'm not going to shut down a player for 2 nights in a row.
Right.
I always want to make sure that the player was only shut down for one of the 2 encounters.
Yeah.
Now, there are some times where the dice don't go in their favor and they fail 2 saving throws, which knocks them unconscious, or there are those instances, but
Yeah, sometimes it happens, right? Because like if you use like a banishment on someone, or you polymorph. I polymorphed a player into a clam once. They were underwater, you know, and he was out the whole combat. He couldn't do anything.
Yep.
You banish them, they can't do anything. But you need to be very careful how frequently you use those things, because you're basically having a player sit out and not participate.
But you can also encourage your other players to go after the wizard that banished your friend.
Absolutely.
You know, get your players back on their feet. Come on, guys. You know.
Yeah. And that's what my players do.
Yeah.
They headhunt wizards like crazy.
Oh,
and then they wonder why I do the same thing. Because it's logical.
Shadowrun has a fragment wizard rule.
Fragment wizard rule.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as there's a high level wizard or any wizard that starts doing magic in a Dungeons and Dragons world, everybody knows that wizards could be very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody starts casting spells, you got to take that guy out, right? So it's just logical. Yeah. Any last parting things we can say about player morale before we wrap this bad boy up?
No, I think we've beaten this horse to death.
We've beaten the horse to death, and we've found some other horses, and we beat on them some too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are actually lots of topics we kind of touched on that would almost be another discussion.
That could easily be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, cool. We'll wrap this one up, and then we will get into our next one. So the next video that we're going to talk about is going to be the generational difference between players and like expectations and stuff. What did we have kind of going on there?
So, really, so I come from a mid-world.
Yeah.
So I've played 1st edition through 5th edition rules, and I've seen everything under the sun. I've played all the video games that my younger friends play, and I've played the video games that my older friends have played.
Right.
And there's very stark differences between the media content that we absorbed 20 years ago and what we absorb now. And that makes a very big difference between what the player's expectations are for a pen and paper game.
Gotcha. And the corollary then would be a DM recognizing and understanding that is going to help him to run a better game or something.
Yeah,
Right? All right,
exactly.
Cool. All right, so we'll get that next time.
All right.
Congratulations, you have made it to the end of the video, and that's a pretty big accomplishment, I think. As a way of celebration, feel free to leave down in the comments, in all caps, "I made it to the end." Anyway, I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button, and also share it with somebody else who might find it useful. And as always, if you have a question about dungeon mastering, or you have a question about your game, please hit me up in the comments. I'm always happy to help. And until next time, let's play D&D.